there's all types of horrifying things that goes on to the military, and racism is just one aspect of it, right? So if more people don't talk about it, which they don't, especially African people in the military, they don't talk about those aspects of it. They just are in there with their objective and then they get out. Maybe if you have a one-on-one with them, they'll talk about it. But because people don't talk about it, the cycle continues of the actions that are able to be perpetuated. The similar things can be said about different institutions that may exist, schools, universities, police systems, whatever the case may be. And so we need to hold them accountable with our word, because our word can become our sword. And that's through writing. And that's also through organizing with each other as well. So the way that that can be leveraged in a way is our ability to be able to not only like listen to each other is a part of the support, but supporting each other in other means as well. If we're able to support each other in an economic sense, that's even powerful. And I don't mean economic sense as far as like just purchasing, but as far as like organizing beyond the dollar, because that's where the world is going to. So you can be able to leverage stories in a way that you can build communities outside of the system that has already been created. And that would even be an even more powerful story. I was talking to one of my partners with the Nihas Foundation in Ghana, and they're in a prominent community that's in a rural area, but that is huge for mining. So you have a lot of mining companies from Germany or Australia or elsewhere that are coming into these areas and using the same manipulative and deceptive tactics they used hundreds of years ago to be able to get access to gold, essentially, and then leaving the people who live there with like basically viscerally nothing, and removing them from their communities, and not giving them much to be able to reestablish themselves or to even benefit from their land that was placed on top of gold, right? And a lot of those stories are going untold too. And I was encouraging my partner to be like, hey, like we need to be writing about this. We need to be publicizing this, but there's dangers in that because the government can be involved. So it's a fascinating thing. And if we're able to hypothetically in this situation create voices or create stories or create narratives around the people who are being impacted by this and get more media attention, you just created an entire community that can not only save themselves hypothetically from the greedy companies, but to empower themselves in a way that goes beyond requesting for the mining company to compensate them, but owning their land and owning the resources that come from their land and being able to create wealth based off of that goes beyond having the Ghana city being pegged to the dollar or whatever the case scenario. Like, no, that this is where communities are empowering themselves and owning their own resources off their own land. And that's how it should be. But it can't happen if we keep not telling these types of stories that are ongoing. That's neocolonialism. That's globalization, right? But these stories are going untold and unnoticed because it's not popular. It's not fun to talk about, right? So it's a lot to be said about leveraging stories and narratives and coming together and support to do it. There's so much power in it.
I believe you. There is so much power in it. Yeah, like I was saying a while ago, I think storytelling is also for the purpose of survival. If we don't tell our story, we risk going extinct. Because what will happen is that other people will tell the story. But what if the other people don't have your interests at heart? They can write you off they can write you off existence and use you basically as object because you don't have story. You see, I'm thinking that in one of these books, in these five-part books about storytelling, that we need to think maybe, for example, of Asian Africans, how they manage to survive. They survive because they know the story. Now, let me explain. If you go into the forest or the desert or a savanna in Africa, for example, you don't play with the lion. Why you don't play with the lion? Because story tells you what the lion can do to you. By knowing this story, you will be alive. If you don't know this story, you think lion is like the zebra. You go there to make fun with him, to play with him, then you will end up being eaten. Now, the people in Asian Africa know where the food is. So when they are hungry, they go to that particular place to eat before agriculture, of course, was developed. They know where the water is, so that when they look for when they are looking to drink water, they go to that specific place to get water. And they also know where the danger is, so that they don't go there to have fun. Because when they go there, that will mean death. So story in this sense can be used for for the purpose of keeping you alive. Like
Hmm.
I was talking about the story that I've written before in 2015. I made the stream water. The man there telling story of conflict, story of war, story of who are the enemy in this village. Because in the village, in the surrounding village in Obuje, as I was describing in the book, not all of them are friends. The children came to know of this one through the story that they were told. Because if you now believe that everybody is your friend, then you got to mess around with your enemy. That is very costly. So he told them about the friends. He told them all the 9 villages that are existing in the neighborhood. And he also told them that not all of friends are your friends. These are your friends. So this is who you need to deal with in this area. These are your enemy. This is how you need to deal with them in this area. And by knowing this, when you go out to play, you don't just play with anything and with anyhow with anybody. You need to know who you are, where you are coming from through the story. But the question I have there is, why is it that we don't tell? It's not only that we don't tell story. Maybe it's because we are not coordinating it in a strategic way. Because if you are a father in a house, you go to work, like me, for example, when I come home, I do share with my wife and my son. We do talk about it. I believe that everybody does this. If something happened to you outside, you go home, you reenact the event to the people in the house so that they know what has happened to you. That is building memory. But
Hmm.
if that is all we do within the limited circle, that is where it ends. But we
Right.
could actually take that experience and interiorize it and elaborate on it and make it consumable for other people that are not within the restricted family. Therefore, story can be used to build also a larger community instead of just the nucleus of the community, which is the family. But why are we not doing that enough? Is it because we don't have instrument to do that, the environment that promotes it? Do we lack the ability to be able to communicate? Because like I'm just saying, all of us are storyteller, whether we know it or not.
I think sometimes people don't really think that people want to listen to their stories, but I think that they would be surprised about how many people do want to listen to your story. And maybe it's not technically in your immediate circle. Maybe sometimes it may be halfway across the world. And that's why it's really important to share your story, because you never know, like I'm repeating myself, but you really never know who's going to get impacted by it, or who's going to be inspired by your story, or who's going to learn from your story. And also understanding now, as we're in this new technological era, there's so many mediums to tell your story now. Like we're doing it through a podcast, but like you can also do it through writing. You can also do it through music. You can also do it through poetry. You can also do it through art, right? And then there's visual art, and now there's NFTs, and there's so many different ways. Even like building a business can be another form of telling your story, right? You can use that as a medium to tell your story. So there's so many different ways. And I think another thing is people don't think that telling your story can be beneficial in the sense of being able to have funds, or being able for it to fund you, right? So people are worried about, like, okay, this isn't going to put food on my table telling my story. Like no one really cares about what my story is. But to that, I challenge you, or I challenge the audience to really think about different ways that it can and it could. And it's just about us reframing the way that we think about our stories, and thinking about what our limitations are. Like we're putting limits on ourselves when we say things like that. And it's not true. Like you would be surprised as to who's willing to support you in the economic means to have your story be heard, or to even hear your story. So I think that there is that to be discussed as well.